Hello, welcome back to my channel. I wanted to do a video today about feeling safe in my body and how that has required self-discovery. So, for context, I experienced childhood SA, and so I have been wanting to film a video about this. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to bring the topic up, but I've just felt called to be a bit more vulnerable, although I feel like my videos have been pretty vulnerable. But to specifically share this part of myself, because it's been a big part. Even when I took some notes before I pressed the record button. Actually, I wanted to film this video yesterday, and I felt really inspired to do it, but it got late in the day. I didn't really have the thought to record this video until kind of late, and I had an appointment yesterday evening and it was dark by the time I finished with that, and I wanted to save it for today. And I thought I was going to get up and have breakfast, get ready for the day, and then film it right away, but that's just not what my body needed. I needed to just kind of sit with myself for a little while. And I spent some time outside doing some yard work, and so that really helped give me more clarity around how I wanted to deliver this message. And when I was thinking about how I was going to start the video, I kept thinking about if I was going to say childhood SA survivor. And then when I was kind of rehearsing that, I kept thinking about the clip of Whitney Houston where she's like, I'm a survivor, I'm a survivor. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it cracks me up every time I see it. She's at an award show and she's mimicking Destiny's Child on stage. Anyway, this is a serious video. And it's for people who are looking for support and feeling safe in their body after experiencing whatever. Could be, some form of trauma. It doesn't necessarily have to be what I experienced, but I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who now, as a adult, and I'm speaking as an adult who held the secret for many years, like literal decades. For me, this was a journey that spanned over around 7 years. I think it started around the time I want to say 7, because I think second grade just feels significant to me, up until I was about 14. So that was a long time holding a secret, and so many of my formative beliefs about myself were rooted in this shame and this guilt that I felt for the secret that I was holding, that at the time I can understand how that secret was rooted in shame, but at the time it was so normalized for me to just feel unsafe in my body. I just assumed that everybody else felt the same way. I was also, and still kind of am, considered to be a quiet person. I was definitely a shy child and a quiet child. And I was the person who, if you would meet me and try to have a conversation with me, not that I would be dismissive, but I was just not the most engaging with people that I didn't know. And I would get the question a lot of times when I was in school, oh, you're quiet, huh? Oh, you must be really quiet. And it's just duh, Captain Obvious. Yeah, I'm pretty quiet. And I think part of that is because of not feeling safe in my body and just in general. But another part of it is, of course, just my personality. And I also considered myself to be an introvert, although now in adulthood and over the last few years, honestly, as I've started to feel more confident in myself and, as who I am, as my individual self, I've had to ask myself, am I really an introvert? Am I as much of an introvert as I think that I am? Or do I just not certain people and just, you know, want to protect my energy. And I think that's the case a lot of times. Honestly, I can honestly say that after having done so much work and like getting to know myself intimately. And I just, you know, I think that I am not as much as an introvert as I thought. Maybe I'm in the middle, but of course it kind of comes along with who I'm interacting with. I think I'm really good on picking up energy, and my discernment is such that, you know, if we interact and I can tell that we just don't vibe, like our personalities clash, then like I don't see a need to continue to engage with someone if it's not absolutely necessary. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that is self-awareness. Many people I don't feel are self-aware, but you know, that's all I'm gonna say about that. Anyway, back to the topic of this video. I wanted to talk to the people who need this message. So with this disclaimer, right, if you've heard the topic of the video and it doesn't resonate with you, go ahead and click off. This is not the message for you. This is for people who are wanting to feel safe in their body for whatever reason. It could be because of some sort of assault, whether it's SA or something else, childhood, or, you know, recently as an adult, or whatever, however old you are. But this is for those people. I'm speaking again from the perspective of somebody who experienced this in childhood. And so I'm going to share what has helped me in this journey as an adult, trying to reparent myself from like separate parent wounds, but also trying to make myself and my inner child feel safe in this body that we live in right now. So one of the big things that has helped for me, I've mentioned this in a few of my other videos if you've watched them, is like I'm a big supporter of mental health services. I have seen a somatic therapist for the past 5 years. Started with her in the fall of 2021. And prior to working with that therapist, I had other therapists. I had worked with other therapists since like, I want to say like 2014 maybe. And it's funny because the first therapist that I went to was actually a couples therapist. Your girl has some very, very low self-worth. And I was dating a guy who was older than me. And I just assume that if you're in a relationship, you just kind of have to make it work. So it was my idea as like a 20-something-year-old to go to couples counseling with somebody who I didn't want to marry. At the time, it made sense to me. I'm not with that person anymore. That was a lesson. I have so many lessons that I could unpack from that relationship, and honestly never want to see that person again. But that was my first go at therapy. My second go at therapy was shortly after I relocated from my hometown, moved to a brand new city, and I was really trying to learn how to be an adult on my own without the support of my family. I had always lived either like on a college campus, or even when I lived alone, it was still like student housing. And then when I was in grad school, I was like back home living with a parent. And then I relocated and I lived with other people, but it was the first time that I was responsible for like all of the bills, all of, you know, my entire lifestyle. I was funding myself. So I felt that it was going to be beneficial for me to get a therapist. It just seemed like something adults do. And I knew that that was something that I wanted to do. And I got this therapist, wasn't the best fit, although I think I may have met with her for like maybe a year or so. We just have very different, her style of therapy was very different from what I needed, and I didn't know enough about the different types of therapy at the time, so I really had to try a few people on. She was the type of therapist, I still don't even know what this is. It was talk therapy, but her style was like interrupting. So like every time I would say something, if I didn't say something the way that she felt I should say it, if it was like not affirming enough for my own benefit, she would stop me. And in hindsight, I guess I kind of understand what she was trying to do, you know, like teaching me how to change my language, but it was just so disruptive that I always felt like when I was in sessions with her, I felt like I didn't really have the opportunity to speak openly because she was interrupting me. I couldn't get a full sentence out without her stopping me and having me rephrase it. So I did that for, I don't think it might have not even been a full year, but I saw her for a few months. I don't think it was super beneficial. I don't really think that I got much out of that experience. And again, I just knew that I needed a therapist. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to unpack with this therapist because all of the childhood essay stuff were honestly things that I had repressed and things that were, again, like normalized to me because I was experiencing that stuff at such a young age for a big chunk of my childhood into adolescent years, and it was just normal. So I didn't even think that that was going to be the core piece of what I was going to be discussing in therapy. I just wanted to know how to like have more confidence and be able to like function as an adult on my own in a new place. Ended things with that therapist, didn't see anybody for a while, and then I ended up finding a therapist through a psychology school. And this was a good fit. Again, it was not somatic therapy, which is really like somatic therapy is more like mind body work. This therapist was, you know, talk therapist again. So my somatic therapist is a talk therapist too, but we do some other activities as needed. And so this therapist that I found through the psychology school, this person was cool. I ended up staying with her for a couple of years, I want to say. And she was like right around the corner from one of my jobs at the time. I would go during lunch when we had our sessions. I think I was going like every week or maybe bi-weekly. And it was a good therapy dynamic. It was very much though just me talking about my problems and her listening. And that's not what I wanted, but I didn't know what I wanted at the time. I just knew that I wanted to feel better. I didn't know exactly what I needed or exactly how I wanted to feel better, but I knew that this therapy relationship wasn't as fruitful as I was hoping that it would be. And it ended in a really awkward way where she kind of like said like, oh, I think this should be the end of our time working together because she got a little bit too personal and started sharing some personal details about her own life. And honestly, I think she was probably embarrassed. And it was good that we ended we ended things when we did. So a few years go by, and then I decide that I'm ready to start getting serious about certain things in my life. Like I wanted to be in a relationship, but I didn't know how to be in a healthy relationship because I had never seen a healthy romantic relationship modeled to me. So I didn't know how to be in one. And I wanted to go to therapy to help me unpack all of that stuff. And there were some other things, again, about like my self-worth and my self-confidence that I knew those things were like very low, but I didn't know exactly how to build myself up in that way. I was just very male focused at the time. And I was so focused on like being in a relationship because again, that was another lever in my success as an adult that I was judging myself on not having. So I ended up looking through a bunch of like online directories for therapists, just kind of looked for people who I thought would be a good fit based on like my circumstances and things like that. And I found a person and I decided like, okay, this person seems like a good fit. Their qualifications are exactly like what I think I need. It sounds like they do. I didn't know what the somatic piece was at the time, but I saw that they had that listed and I'm like, looks like they do something that is beyond just like me talking to a person and a person listening to my problems. And maybe this would be like more interactive where I'll actually learn more about myself. It was just something about my therapist when I saw her like bio where I was like, yes, I'm gonna work with this person. I ended up reaching out and she didn't have any openings. And, you know, it told me like I'm fully booked, but I could put you on the wait list. If anything changes, I'll be sure to reach out. In the interim, I ended up going with another person who I wasn't really a fan of. And I ended up meeting with that person for like maybe 3 sessions. And then after the third session, I had decided like this is not a good fit. It's so interesting how it worked out because I canceled with that person, and then my current therapist who I wanted to work with had immediately reached out to me like after I canceled with this other person and told that person like I don't think I want to continue with therapy with you. My therapist reached out and said, hey, I just had a person cancel on this day and time. Like, let me know if you're still interested and still looking for a therapist. We can schedule our first session. So it was in that first session with her. I was so happy that she had space in her calendar. It was in that first session where she had me outline like what my goals were for therapy, what brought me to therapy. And, again, it was very focused on like wanting to be in a romantic relationship, but wanting to know myself well enough to like show up as a good partner. It was very much focused on like how I was showing up for other people in my life and not about like I want to show up as the best version of myself. So she said, okay, cool, I can help you do that. And in our first session, I didn't talk to her about my problems. She talked to me about how my body works. She talked to me about how my nervous system works, about my brain, about, the prefrontal cortex and how that's like the youngest part of my brain as far as like it doesn't actually fully develop until you're the age of 25. And all of these things, like I didn't really understand. I understood the nervous system as a concept, but I didn't really understand what that meant as far as like fight or flight. I had heard that, but I didn't understand what it meant in the context of me as a person and the life that I had lived. So she's telling me all this stuff and I'm like taking notes. Like this is the first time I've ever had therapy with somebody where I was just like taking notes, and I felt like I walked away with a biology lesson, a lesson of my body. And that helped me, and it made me very optimistic about our time together that was to come, because for the first time I was talking to a therapist who didn't just sit there silently and just listen to me, but she educated me on like my body. And what I didn't realize at the time was like she was setting this up so that every session after that where I was just kind of talking to her, she would reference that first session we had. So if I say like, oh, I'm dating this guy, because a lot of our first sessions was about like people I was dating. I was new in the city and I was like on dating apps and stuff, and I was going on a lot of dates. And so I was talking to her about like dating and stuff, and she would always reference that first session. Like, okay, so you were upset when this thing happened and you went into your nervous system did this thing. And so remember, your sympathetic nervous system is responsible for fight or flight. It's not that's not the thinking brain. Like that's the feeling brain and all of this stuff. And it was just a way of somebody talking to me about my body and my feelings and my emotions in a way that I had never experienced before. And it was so empowering. And it was from that point that I started to build trust with her, because I wasn't coming out the gate telling her my deepest, darkest secrets on session number one. Like that's just human nature. Like you have to build trust with somebody. And especially if I'm going to be talking to you about like abuse I sustained, in childhood, I'm not going to just trust that information with any old body. That was my thought at the time. And again, that wasn't even at the front of my mind for like why exactly I needed therapy. So as we started to talk and she started to ask me specific questions. She let me talk about the relationship stuff for a while. And then our sessions pivoted. So it went from like me just kind of telling her about life and this is what's going on, and like, oh, I'm dating this guy, he's so great. And like the guy at the time, I remember I was dating this guy, red flags all over, right? He was a walking red flag. And I just thought he was like God's gift to the earth at the time. And I'm telling her all this stuff. And she started to ask me questions about like my childhood. She started to ask me questions about my dynamic with my father. And like, we started unpacking that relationship, and it was a bit strained. Like my dad was present in my life, but it was strained. He's deceased now. But, it was strained up to the point that he like passed away. But we were very close when I was a child. And, you know, she started asking me about my relationship with my mom. And so we started talking about these things. And so she started to connect some dots for me that I had never even known to think about. You know, the reason I'm attracted to this type of a person who is emotionally detached and, you know, bonding over our shared trauma, is because of my childhood experience with my father. It is because, you know, that's the first male example I had of how I'm supposed to be treated by a man, all of these things, and how that stuff lives in me, and how those core beliefs that were instilled in me as I was growing up and, you know, a child, have evolved now to an adult version, and they're showing up in my dating patterns. So I found that to be really helpful. And so as she started to like break this down in my dating life, I started to talk to her about some inadequacies that I was feeling about myself. And we started to dive into that. And as I got more comfortable with her and felt safer around her, I know that my childhood self had to feel safe with this person to start revealing all of these really deep things about my life. And I started to tell her about these experiences that I had with like childhood SA, and, you know, what I learned from her was that there was one point, we had talked about this stuff for a while, and there was one point where I kept telling her, I feel stuck. I just feel stuck in life. I feel like I'm not progressing. And she said, you know, we have to do something about that. Your child, the child that's inside of you, she needs to be, like, we have to acknowledge her. She's hurting. She needs to be addressed. You are an adult now. The things that happened to you when you were a child were wrong, you know, and she and you have held so much shame for other people's actions for a really long time. And at the time, she didn't understand that those things that were happening were not her fault. But you as an adult can do something about it. This is not her fault. This was not her fault. You have to be the one to tell her that. And you can also do the thing that you couldn't do when you were a child. So you were fearful of telling a trusted adult. You are a grown up now. You can tell a trusted adult. So one of the first big things that I had to do in the somatic therapy, because it is like mind, body. So we do the talk stuff. We talk about the brain and the nervous system and all of that. But there are also some physical activities. So there was one activity, the first time I was feeling stuck was, which was a different time than what I just described. The first time I was feeling stuck, she had me like physically stand up and scream. I had to stand up and scream because I had shared with her that, you know, when I was assaulted, how it would start. And I would be cornered, and I would be in a corner, like physically in a corner, and I wouldn't be able to move. And so she had me stand up, and she said, you are safe to scream now. So we have to scream for the little girl who couldn't scream, who was too afraid to scream, who feared for her life. So I stand up, I scream, and she has me like do this like pushing motion, and I'm just like screaming like, get away from me, get off me, get away from me, like just repeatedly. And I'm doing this, I'm screaming, I start crying because I'm releasing this emotion that's been held in me for literal decades at this point. I'm trying to think. I started seeing her. Let me do some math real quick. Do I have my phone? Because I didn't realize how long I had held this stuff in. If I was 7 when this started, let's say, went on for 7 years, I started seeing her. I really want to figure this out because this is crazy. I feel like I've done this before. That was 5 years ago. So if I kept the secret from the time in which this all started, It shouldn't take me this long to figure it out, but here we are. Is that right? Dang, that's crazy. 7 plus. I held that secret for 28 years. That's insane to me. And that was just the start of it. Like, think about that. You have held, if you have experienced something like this for like the childhood essay and stuff, or even a traumatic event that you haven't addressed, holding it in for decades. It's almost 30 years of a secret that I kept. And then in hindsight, now I'm like, oh, I wonder why. I wonder why I had all this insecurity. I wonder why my self-worth was so low. I wonder why I didn't have self-esteem. And there were so many things that in hindsight now, I blamed myself for not pursuing. I remember when I was in high school, I really wanted to get into like drama, and I made every excuse under the sun not to do it. And the truth is, being in theater, being in on a stage, what does it require? It requires people to see you. And I wanted to do everything except for being seen. And your young high school 15 to 18-year-old self, and again, like, I had just pretty much, I was still experiencing the essay in my like freshman year of high school. So like, for me, there was no way that I could have been able to put myself in a center stage. Put myself center stage. When I was young, my family really wanted to get me into modeling. And I was open to it for a little while. This was like back when American Girl dolls were a thing. I remember writing a letter, and that was like really innocent, right? I wrote a letter to the American Girl catalog, because I used to get the catalogs, and I was subscribed to the magazine. Oh, I miss magazines. I was subscribed to all types of like little teeny bopper magazines. Just such an innocent, sweet child. Like, I have to like just acknowledge that about my childhood self. It's like I was seeking so many like joyful, innocent things, and that part of me just had such a rough life. And there was this like juxtaposition of this really dark time and these dark moments with like this levity and this like playful energy. And I just really want to continue to lift her up in that like playful energy. But my family wanted me to get into modeling, and I wrote a letter when I was young. Like elementary school young. I wrote a letter to the American Girl catalog, and their offices were like in Chicago, and I had headshots done. I sent them one of my headshots, and I was like, hey, I really love I love the magazine and the catalog. Like, I have an Addie doll. I'm such a huge fan. I have the computer game. I would love to be a model. And they responded, and I was so shocked I got a response, but they responded and they were like, oh, and I think they sent me my pictures back. But they were like, thank you so much for reaching out. We're so glad to hear that you're a fan. We appreciate your interest, but like, we go through model agencies. So if that's what you want to pursue, we would have to connect with you through a model agency or something. And they sent me my headshots back. But I thought that was a nice gesture to respond to a kid. But that was my dream. Like, that was my vision for modeling, was like to be in the American Girl catalog, or, to be in the Girl's Life magazine. I feel so emotional like thinking about that now, because it was just such a sweet, innocent moment for myself. And like, I was proud of myself for even writing the letter, because I sent them a handwritten letter. And yeah, and it was when I got older, when I started to like get taller and like develop, and puberty hit, where it was like, okay, I've transitioned from being a cute little tiny, kid or teeny bopper to like still kind of being a teeny bopper, but like now I look physically like a fashion model. And so there was this whole thing of like my mom had put me in this modeling school. We were doing model searches and stuff, and I wasn't really into it at that point because I was also like what, like 7 years into SA, being SA'd at this point. So I didn't have the same, I developed body dysmorphia, I think, as a part of dealing with all of that, because how I felt about my body was not what people were telling me they felt about my body. And how I felt about my beauty was not how other people were telling. Like I didn't even want people to see me. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want to be seen, because if you see me, then you can do things to me. That, I think that was kind of the logic there. So once I was a teen and I was just tall, willowy figure, then it was like, oh, my mom put me in these, we were doing like John Casablanca model search, which I think is so predatory now, that some of the things allegedly, let me say that I hear about all of those things. And I'm like so thankful that that stuff didn't work out, because who knows what could have happened. But I don't think they were checking for people that look like me anyway. So we would go to those. We had flown to Chicago a couple times to like go to like model searches and stuff, and trying to audition me for like commercials and all of this stuff. And it wasn't fun for me at that point. I remember when I was in high school, I may have been in middle school actually, because I was pretty tall in middle school too. She took me to this runway. It was like a catwalk class, and it was some man who was like teaching these teenage girls how to walk in high heels. And we would walk up and down the like food court. And it was a cute walk or whatever. I guess I learned how to walk, but I didn't want to do that. It was, again, just like, I'm already tall. Now you making me put these high heels on. And the high heels that I wore were like from a family member's wedding that I was in. So they were just these like very like pointed toe rhinestone pumps, and I'm wearing like, I don't know, a baby tee and some low cut jeans. This was like the early 2000s. And I'm just walking up and down the mall trying not to feel horrible about myself, like wishing I could crawl into a hole. And again, like no one knew that I was being essayed. So I don't know. It was just, I just felt like I was being pushed into all of these very public spaces when I felt like I just wanted to hide and put on baggy clothes, and I didn't want people looking at me, and I didn't want people seeing my body. And like, I'm like being almost being pushed into this very public space. None of that worked out, thankfully. But, holding that kind of a secret for nearly 30 years does something to you. It really does something to you. So I was so thankful to find my therapist. And so when we did that activity, that was representing like me having the voice to push the people away, right? Like I'm doing this because my child self couldn't. I can scream and tell you to get away from me. I can fight you and tell you to get off of me. She couldn't do that. She was too afraid to do that. She was too afraid to do that, but I could do it. That was the first thing she had me do. The second thing she had me do, because, after that, things went well. As far as like my life, I felt like I was able to just kind of like move through life. And one of the big things that I learned in therapy was like your nervous system is always going to be reacting to your surroundings. The sympathetic nervous system isn't the logical brain. It is it's how you survive. It's surveying your environment for danger, is surveying your environment for threat. So if there's anything remotely close to something that you perceived as a threat, if your body clocks it, you're going to go into some sort of fight or flight state. Or what are the other ones? Fawn or something else. I forget what the other one is. And I started to notice that. And it was happening so often because for me, the triggers were always with men. They were always with men. I did not realize at the time how scared of men I was. And it was because, not that I think that men are inherently bad, but it was because of my experience that I had with most men in my life. I think the only man in my life who wasn't like a child, but an actual man when I was growing up, or the only couple of men, there were a handful of like good men who I felt safe around. And sadly, only one of them was family. One of them was my grandfather, who was like the sweetest, kindest person I ever met. And when he passed away, I always wondered, like, dang, did I just feel this way about my granddad because he was my granddaddy, or was he actually like that? And hearing other kids from my neighborhood like want to come up, and at the there's a part in the funeral where they open it up for people to come say words about the deceased person. And so many people that I grew up with, so many of my aunt's friends and stuff, like boys, got up, that who I remember as boys, they're grown men now, they got up and they spoke about like my grandfather being this wonderful person, and he was such a great example, and like, they said all the things that I always felt about him, but I had never vocalized it to anyone. And I was like, I'm so happy to hear that how I felt about him was how other people felt about him too. He was just like angelic being of a person, and he was one of the men that I felt very safe around, and was very affectionate, and like was big on telling me he loved me and giving me hugs and all of these things. And I just didn't have that in a safe way with a lot of people, a lot of men in my life. Another one was one of my dad's close friends who would he would I would go to my dad's house on the weekend, and sometimes he would drop me off at home. And he was always a person who listened to me. My therapist says like one of the big things about feeling safe is when someone sees you, hears you, and hears you, and I don't know, or maybe it's just seeing and hearing you, like that's what makes true human connection. And I felt like this was another example of a grown man who saw me as a child, like who saw me as a person who also was a child. And I was big on like telling these like really whimsical stories, and he would listen to my stories and be cracking up. And it was just a good example of having another person in my life who, like I said, sadly wasn't even my family, but I felt safe with this particular friend of my dad's. And I always had really good experiences with him, and I felt comfortable talking to him about some things that I didn't feel comfortable talking to my dad about, funny enough. And then, my dad and I had a complicated relationship, but when I was a little kid, like he was my best friend. He was my fun parent when I was a kid. And then as I got to be a teen, our relationship was a bit more strained. So as I continued in therapy and I started to unpack some of these relationships, and it was the realization that like, I'm just not this scary person that I thought I was. I was scared of people. I was scared of men because for so many years during my formative years, like as a child, I was not safe in my body when I was around men in particular, when I was around other, when I was around little boys and people in my family, so it made sense that I was having these sorts of reactions and responses when I would be out in the wild, right, out in public, and I would meet people, or people would approach me, and I would not know what to do. I swear, and I mean no harm to any of the men who've approached me in life, but I remember in high school there was one guy. He approached me. I don't know this man. I didn't know this boy from a can of paint. He was actually, I kind of knew him, but not personally. I was an aide for one of my math teachers, and I was in algebra class, and I was in 10th grade aiding for the 11th grade class. So this 11th grader comes up to me, and he's like, "Hey, do you mind if I talk to you after class?" And I was like, okay. And I knew I wasn't talking to this boy after class. Mind you, it was just too close to the stuff that was happening to me. And I didn't trust boys at that time in my life, or most men. And so after class, I went out and I like ran off because I knew I wasn't about to talk to this boy. I didn't know what he wanted. And he liked me. He wanted my number or something. And then my teacher the next day was like, oh, so and so told me you left him in the hallway. And I felt bad because I didn't, I wasn't trying to be a jerk or anything. I think he took it personally, and it wasn't. It was just fear. And that was when I was an early teen that happened. And then it happened when I was an adult. This might have been this was like 2018. This happened. I was at a festival with my friends, and some grown ass man who looked like he probably could have been my dad, my father's age, walked up to me, and it freaked me out. And he didn't even say anything. He didn't say anything rude. He just walked up to me and said, something, hello or something. And I was like deer in headlights, and just kind of, I was with my mom and just kind of backed away. And she said, oh, you're attracting strays. And I know how that, actually I don't know. I was going to say I know how that probably looked. But it's never been like oh, I think I'm better than you type thing if I reject a man. And it's not even me saying like, oh, thank you for that compliment. No, thank you. It has been like, my nervous system has been like, flight, girl. We got to take flight. You got to run. We're not safe. And I realize that now. And so I don't have as many of those moments now. But when I've been able to have a conversation. Like recently, I've been able to like more easily have a conversation with the man, because I'm like, I don't know this man. I'm not going to make, assume the worst about him. I need to calm my nervous system, because what if this is some work opportunity or something? It's not always something salacious, And that's with anybody, but for me specifically, I really had to learn how to calm my nervous system and be present enough to be able to have discernment about what's happening around me, so that I truly could feel safe enough in my body to be able to know if like, okay, this person approaching me is a threat, or this person approaching me is, interested in me for whatever reason. Was that the second? Oh, so the second big thing I had to do was talk to my mom. Mind you, this was a secret that I held for 28 years before I actually said the words out of my mouth to my therapist. And again, in hindsight, like hindsight is 2020, right? There's so many moments that I had, that I had with people over the years where I'm like, oh, I responded that way out of fear. I responded that way because I hadn't unpacked those emotions. I didn't feel safe in my body. I felt attacked, even though the person wasn't attacking me. I was like, ready to flee because I thought I was in danger, or we're going to be in danger. And I reached another point where I started to tell my therapist, like, I feel stuck. I feel stuck. And I was saying it so much, and I was describing to her what was happening in my life. And she said, there's more energy that you need to release. This is the somatic part of it all, right? It's like the physical release and doing these like physical movements and stuff. And so for this time, she was like, you need to talk to your mother. Your mom was a trusted adult then, but you were too afraid to talk to her. You were too afraid to talk to anybody, so you've held the secret. Your inner child needs you to tell someone. You have to tell someone who you trust that you were assaulted. This was so hard for me. It was so hard for me. I had all of these scenarios playing in my mind about how my mother was going to respond, and she was going to break down and cry, and she was going to be upset and X, Y, and Z. I was so concerned with like her comfort instead of my own, which is another, byproduct of the childhood wounds. I'm sure the essay also lended to that, because no way in hell should you be more concerned. I mean, you can have empathy for people and all of this stuff, and not want to hurt people and have grace with an individual. But like when it comes to your personal safety, you deserve to be safe in your body, And so in the childhood, when I think about childhood me, she was so afraid and believed the people who were assaulting her that she was going to get in trouble, that it was her fault, that like she deserved this. And the fear prevented her from talking to a trusted adult. But she needed me to speak on her behalf now as an adult because I can do that. So I ended up having that conversation with my mom. And I mean, like, I was a anxious mess about how to even bring that up. How do you just like casually mention, hey, I was, SA'd for like 7 years in my, childhood. And I don't even think I told her that detail, like how long it was, because it was like ongoing by the same people, and most of the time. And so I didn't even know how to have that conversation, but I was home one year for Thanksgiving break, and I told her, and I was more emotional, than I thought I would be. And she didn't respond the way that I thought she would, and like being upset, or I don't know why I thought she would be like all emotional and upset and stuff, but she was very, she was very comforting. It was a very comforting response. And I told her, I think that's part of the reason why there were so many things that you were pushing me to do, like the modeling and the, even when I said I wanted to perform, she was really pushing me to like audition for things. And I was like, I just didn't want to do that because I didn't want to be visible. I didn't want to be seen in that way. And she understood and she apologized, and hugged me. And so that was a huge obstacle. That was a huge bridge I had to cross to become this version of myself who can now talk about this kind of stuff on the internet for strangers. And it's not for like any sort of clout, because like what kind of weird clout would that be? But it's really because I know how hard it is to live literal decades and hold these secrets, and then not even really be able to put two and two together about how, if you're living what you perceive as a miserable life, how those things, those deep dark secrets that you hope and pray that nobody ever finds out about, those things that you feel shame about, how they impact you as an adult. And even, I'm speaking from the perspective of somebody who experienced that stuff in childhood, but you can go through something traumatic in adulthood and that will cause you to not feel safe in your body, regardless of what it is. And it deserves to be addressed. Like, you deserve to have space where you can actually find a way to decompress and become present in your body, so that your nervous system is not always on fight or flight mode. That's also an indicator that you're just not present, because now I can be in environments and I'm so embodied now that I know instantly if I'm somewhere I'm not supposed to be without going into fight or flight. I will walk into an environment, or I'll be in the middle of a conversation with someone, and I can tell that that person's tone is something odd. I don't need to go into fight, and because I can also argue. I could argue somebody down. I don't need to do all of that though. I never been a physical, like, put my hands on you type person, but like, if we're playing the dozens, like, I'm gonna win every time and I'm gonna hurt your feelings. I don't need to go to that level. If I see that somebody is being very abrasive with their language, like, I can just simply say, okay, this is not the energy that I want to partake in today. So I'm going to excuse myself and I'm going to go to an environment where I feel safer. And when it comes to the boundaries and that, like, I've said this to people, like, you don't really owe other people explanations for how you move in your life. Like, be responsible if you got kids or whatever, but if somebody makes you feel uncomfortable for whatever reason, you have every right to remove yourself, if you can do so safely, from that environment. Even if it's, hey, excuse me for a second, I'll be right back, and then you never come back. Bye. Get out of there. Like, sometimes that needs to happen to put yourself in a safe space. Or if you got to do the old oh man, I just got a call. I got to go deal with this. I got a work emergency, or I got a family emergency or something. Not to call any of that. I don't like to say that kind of stuff about people, grandma died or whoever, because I don't want to speak that over anybody's life. But you say what you need to get yourself out of that situation, because as much as I would love to tell somebody online, like, advocate for yourself. I'm always going to tell you to advocate for yourself, but advocate for yourself in the way of telling somebody like, hey, you're making me feel very uncomfortable in this environment. If it's not safe for you to do that, do what you need to do to get out of that situation. Now, if you feel safe doing that, then like by all means, advocate for yourself and tell that person why. Really quickly, because I only got 5 minutes left on this memory card. The third thing, was that three? Yeah, the third big thing I had to do, it wasn't necessarily that I was feeling stuck, but it was that I had felt instantly like I regressed into my child self. This was in December of last year, 2025. One of the people that, the main person, which is crazy to me, the main person that would essay me over this time found me on social media, added me, and was like happy, you know, to connect, and requested to follow me. And this was somebody that I had seen them at my dad's funeral. And then when I relocated, we got together for lunch, and I met them. I met with them. That was the first time I had seen them. And then, because again, this was like somebody that I was close to. This was basically a family member, a close family friend, and grew up with this person, like one of my best friends, grew up like a sibling. And I was telling my therapist about it, and she was like, when I told her that I had seen him before I moved, she was like, yeah, you don't have to do that. You do not have to interact with the person that assaulted you. And if you need to say it to them, then that's what's going to happen. But like, don't subject yourself to that. And I started to think about it like, yeah, you're right. Like, why would I subject myself to like this person being allowed in my presence when like they violated me so many times, and I'm now having to do all this work to repair the damage that they were responsible for. That's unfair to me. And it's unfair to my inner child to allow this person into my life. So I didn't talk to them, hadn't talked to them. They had texted me, ignored all the texts. I think I might have blocked the number. They reached out to me on social media last December, and I felt panicked. And it just so happened that I had therapy that same week, and I told my therapist like, yeah, I was about to block them, but then I was like, shoot, like my profile is public and like X, Y, and Z. And she stopped me and she said, what are you afraid of? And I just said, I don't know. Just like, I didn't want them to do whatever. And she said, you are an adult, and it sounds like you need to tell them exactly what they did to you and why they should not reach out to you ever again. When I tell you I was sweating bullets, it took me a couple of days, maybe a week, to respond to this person. I responded to the DM because they had DM'd me like something real happy, like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. And I'm just like, I'm not. Like, I'm low-key terrified that you reached out to me and you seem so excited, all things considered. So I told him like, listen, you assaulted me throughout most of my adolescent years, and I would appreciate it if you not contact me again. And I think I mentioned something about like therapy has made me realize that I don't actually have to be in touch with you at all, and I don't want you to contact me ever again. Didn't hear back from that person, and you know, here I am today. So there's more that I could say, but I only have 2 minutes left, and this is already like a long video. I wanted to record this because I know that so many people hold these dark secrets into like, you know, adulthood, and it's unfair. It's really unfair to have to live with these types of secrets. And if you do not feel safe in your body and you want to, I wanted to share this as an example of somebody who every day feels a little bit safer in their body. And like, do things still come up? Yes. It's not like some switch was flipped and like suddenly none of the stuff happened. Like, it still happened, and I still have to calm her, my inner child, at times, but like now she knows she's safe. I truly believe that my inner child knows that she is safe and that I have done the best that I can do over these past 5 years to make it so she's comfortable. And I plan to continue to do that. And I just want to encourage other people, if you want to feel safe in your body, you absolutely can do it. I am an example of somebody who has done it. It is not easy work, but if you decide that it's something that you want to do, I support you. I encourage you to do it. You owe it to yourself because you deserve to live a life where you feel safe with who you are and in your body. That's it. That's the message. I hope that this message found who it was meant for. I may share a little bit more of this story at a later time, or just other aspects, as I didn't even get through all of my notes. I hope this helped whoever it was for, and I will see you in the next video.